Okay, so not taking further time, guys. Let's start with the session. Thank you for joining in, and thank you, Pranav, for taking out time to talk to our participants. For everyone who doesn't know Pranav or might have not come across his profile, he has been in this space for a very long time, and he's a very dear friend of both mine and Akshay. And he has himself seen some really interesting startups, and he has backed some really amazing projects in this space, starting from Elrond to Holochain to a lot of other Indian projects that they have been backing in. And has he always, whenever we have had a discussion with him, he has always provided some really interesting insights to of this for this space, be it in terms of blockchain or when it was crypto or right now with DeFi. And something you guys can learn a lot from about the industry, what the trends are, and also if you have anything that you know regarding your ideas that you are building and you would like to understand what the future is or how things are going about. I think so you can easily ask him those questions, and he would you get to learn from his experience and what he feels about that. Thank you, Pranav, for joining in, and please over to you for this.
Thank you, Manav. And I think, as you mentioned, so I've known Akshay and Manav for a fairly long time now. I think it's been about 3 years at least. And 3 years in blockchain space is like at least 6 to 7 years, or maybe if not more. So good to be here, and thanks, Manav, for this. I would say possibility. And I think let me do it this way. I was discussing with Manav in terms of who's in the audience, and the intention is that how we can add value to all of you. So we'll spend a lot of time in terms of understanding your concerns, clarifications, context, responding to, etc. So let me just take very limited time. We have let's say about an hour or so. So let me start by sharing about myself, my own background, my own experience, and then subsequently in terms of what are the things that we have experienced as a fund in DeFi space, and what do we see DeFi space emerging out to be. I think this will give you enough context, and then we can dive into specific questions, or we can pick up some themes that would add value to all of you. So I think let me share very briefly about myself. My background has been largely in financial services, traditional finance. So in that sense, I've been across the spectrum. I've been in private equity in Southeast Asia. So this was started by ex-energy minister of Philippines, Southeast Asia head of Lazard Ferris, and bunch of people. Idea was to invest into renewable energy projects in Southeast Asia. And so I worked in this for let's say about a year and a half, and then I joined Aditya Birla Group. At that point in time, the entire financial services was sort of coming together. There were three actually financial services businesses, but Birla Sun Life Insurance, there was mutual fund, then there was lending business, but they were independent businesses without any synergy, and they were run in a very old kind of a way. So when the new management came in from ICICI Prudential specifically, they had a grand vision in terms of not only aggregating all the businesses, synergizing them, but also scaling them up by acquisitions, and also starting new lines of businesses. So almost for a decade or so, when I was there in Aditya Birla Financial Services, I was across the spectrum. So beyond private equity earlier, I was subsequently into asset management side for a significant period of time, both domestic asset management as well as offshore asset management. Within the offshore asset management, I was involved in setting up the Singapore office, Dubai office, launching a fund in Korea, a debt fund, and then managing a bunch of institutional relationships, especially in the Middle East. So that gave me a good context in terms of how institutions think and what do they want, and how they behave, and so on and so forth. After that, my involvement was more on the broking and distribution side. So we, at that point in time, there was acquisition that was done of a broking business. So gave me a good understanding of how a retail business actually operates. So how difficult it is, unless it is an online business, and the way we experience some of these applications in DeFi, for example. In traditional side, retail is slightly complex, cash guzzler business. Then very briefly, I was on the structured finance side, and for a significant period, let's say about 2 to 3 years, I was on the life insurance side, heading the SME insurance across India. And that came as a transition very interestingly, because the intention was to build a very customer-centric business. So we set up an innovation lab at that point in time, build digital applications, used it for counseling SMEs, etc., and so on and so forth. So this is the context, that is the journey that happened. It was extremely exciting. Evaluated a lot of, M&As, McKinsey's, dealing with McKinsey's, KPMG's, etc. of the world. Some very interesting mandates, happened, some stealth, some public, and so on and so forth. But I think after a certain point, I realized that the financial services ecosystem is broken both horizontally and vertically. And this was on the back of my mind, but I did not have an alternate in my mind, right? And you can't create systems as an individual. Systems happen because there is a larger trend which is happening. So I'll come to it. Why I believe DeFi is extremely exciting. But at that point in time, it was very clear that this won't work, the way financial services and the banking system is designed. So then, in my own way, I was, sort of figuring out if I can invest into fintech and some of the promising ones, and see if there is a way to support them, grow, etc. But that also, once again, it was hitting a dead end, essentially because the cost of distribution was extremely high for these fintech products. And especially, one of the question that was asked when all of you were coming in by Harshil is that most of the models were built around lending, and there was very limited intelligence around the way the models were built. And most of the lending plays which have scaled up and become unicorns, they became unicorns because the existing traditional financial services players were extremely inefficient and ineffective. So there was a vacuum there in the market. Not that these lending platforms were extremely innovative. So I'm not generalizing. There are also few which were innovative, but largely they were addressing inefficiency and effectiveness of the current banking system and the NBFC system. So this is a state of affairs that happened in India. And then I ended up discovering Bitcoin somewhere in 2016 end. And it was introduced to me by my brother, and as a financial asset. And I was like, who are you to teach me what a financial asset? I've been across the spectrum, and somewhere I have seen all the financial services, products, services over the past decade or so. But when I looked at Bitcoin, and when I looked at that, what kind of people were involved in terms of whether it is miners, I mean to say application builders, developers, speculators, investors, and I think there was like a whole chain of people who were involved, and these were the talented people, right? So it was very evident that something like this will only proliferate, because my thesis is that the talent is arrival of talent is I would say is a starting point of emergence of a sector, right? So at that point in time, it was very clear that if talented people were getting involved into this space, that eventually this space will spawn off into something very interesting and solve for the real world problems over a span of time. Now, discovering Bitcoin, I landed up, meeting with, because I knew the family office that had invested into the largest crypto exchange at that particular point in time, ZebPay. So I landed up meeting with the founders of ZebPay through that family office that had made an investment. So at these rapid fire 45-minute question, so my sense is I will also leave you guys with 45 minutes so that you can also throw your rapid fire questions at me. But there the intention was to really understand, what the hell this thing was, and then subsequently discovering Ethereum was even more exciting. That you can have smart contracts, and like the way you guys are building on Zilliqa, it was extremely interesting, because then the visualization was about what kind of applications you can build. And for few of us, or my sense is many of us here in the audience, if you are sci-fi fans, then we know that if that future is going to emerge at some point, then we require a very solid foundation, and basically machine-to-machine interactions, human-to-human interactions, and human-to-machine interactions to become more efficient and effective, right? I think that is unbeatable logic, right? So when something like this was, very clear that something like this has to emerge, then it was very clear as a choice: should I be part of the past or should I be part of the future, right? And then I took a very conscious decision that let me take move out from Birla Group, and let me start understanding the space a lot more. And my intention was not to start a fund. So a couple of years down the line, landed up meeting with like-minded people like Himanshu, then Rajesh on the legal side, and we were like, can we do this the right way? Because there were enough misguided, people were getting misguided. There was no perspective around allocation strategy, systematic approach towards due diligence. It was happening in US by the funds, but not in, let's say, in Asia largely. Asia, there were a couple of funds. Hashed was there, Fenbushi was there, couple of funds, which we look up to. But beyond this, not much was happening in Asia. So you're like, can we set up something really marquee, something which is extremely regulated, and ahead of the curve in terms of regulations as much as we can, build a very solid, authentic team with extremely high integrity, and see where it goes. So in the first year, in FY19, when we started Woodstock Fund in FY19, and in the first year we made 5 investments. So 3 of them, I think it's all about also the macro panning out. 3 of them have become unicorns. And then subsequently we made another 13 investments in the next financial year. And then in all, we have made about 28 investments, all inclusive. So overall, we have made investments across infrastructure layer, decentralized finance, tokenization, and Web 3.2 protocols. So that's been the journey. We recently launched Fund 2, etc. But I just wanted to give you a flavor that, for us, this journey has been about building things brick by brick. So there are 2-3 points I want to summarize from this, which could be valuable to you. Is that point number 1 is that if you build an application in this space, it can be extremely profitable, fast growing, vis-a-vis a traditional finance application. So this space, purely from this logic, is a very powerful space which will grow. Point number 2 is that if you look at it purely from the perspective of what the traditional finance cannot address, here in case of DeFi, you can, it's very frictionless, very seamless applications, cross-border applications can be built. So that is where the world is moving, right? And the third thing is, if you want to build anything formidable, it can't be built overnight. It is about building something brick by brick, addressing a problem that may also be a moving target, and acclimatizing yourself to get to that point. So it is eventually all about the founder when you're building an application, and it is your perseverance, and it is also about your resource mobilization in terms of how you are able to get, let's say, attract a co-founder, attract a team, etc., and take it forward. So I think this is what I wanted to share with you, that this is what I've seen. Now coming to DeFi as a space, now we were there in DeFi since practically TVL was 0, and now it has crossed 100 billion and more. So in that sense, the space has exploded over the past, let's say, about 1.5 to 2 years at least. The growth has been stellar, and this is only going to grow, this space. And the logic is very simple, because when we are seeing DeFi applications overall, one is the set of applications which create, let's say, for example, let's say Harshil was asking about synthetics, right? Physical real world assets having a synthetic application, let's say, synthetic, some sort of a derivative on, let's say, blockchain, for example, with some sort of a trading or borrowing, lending, etc. So this is one, which is like a one-to-one. But because of the magnification of the liquidity which is happening, and this liquidity is being driven by algorithms, which we call as AMM, the space is going to attract a lot more capital, lot more liquidity, till the point it becomes too big to manage. So I think, so if you ask me personally, I think 100 billion is just the beginning. It's like tip of the iceberg, and we are in it for this to grow rapidly. Now, one thing which I would say, which I would like to share with all of you, and I will not spend too much time on this, is that all of you should also spend some time to become much more conversant with the regulations, and what does it take to be compliant. Because if you're building an application, let's say DeFi application, which has to be, let's say, integrated with the banking system, or you want to attract, let's say, best of the funds, etc., to participate, then there has to be a compliance layer to whatever extent possible. You should be aware in terms of what is the risk you're taking when you are having a certain application. I'm just giving an example. For example, let's say if your application is around building synthetics, then what is the law of the land in terms of looking at how the synthetics are treated and where your structures should be, so that you are able to manifest that vision without getting into any regulatory complexities. I'll just leave with this thought, and I think Manav, maybe I'll open it to everyone so that they can ask questions and we can make this more interactive.
Sure. Let's do that, Pranav. So, guys, whoever has any questions for Pranav, please raise your hands, or just by tone ask your questions, and Pranav will answer those questions. So, be it anything related to DeFi, something that you guys are wanting to build, anything that you have read, anything that you guys want to ask. Let's make it interactive. Anyone?
Okay, maybe I can just start the question.
Yes, Prashant.
This is more initially just to talk about the blockchain and then maybe get a little deeper into DeFi. How do you see blockchain taking up when decentralized finance, and if you look at financial background is always something which is the backbone of anything, be it corporate, be it country, be it state, anything for that matter. But do you see blockchain, because of all the regulations there being, how do you see blockchain taking up as a technology for finance and for other domains?
So, Prashant, good question. And so let me see from where I can add some nuances to this. So Prashant, one thing is, what is blockchain? I mean, blockchain is not a front-end technology, it's a back-end technology, right? And basically, it creates very seamless pathways for value to value, data, etc., to get transferred without requiring an intermediary, right? So in that sense, it is absolutely makes sense to have a blockchain as a technology, getting used, right? Now, Prashant, let's look at it slightly differently. Is it about blockchain or is it about distributed ledger technology? Now, there are other technologies, like for example, there is Holochain, there is Hashgraph, etc. Zilliqa is of course a faster blockchain, and so on and so forth. So this whole fabric that we call as a decentralized network is something which can create very interesting peer-to-peer applications which have not been built so far, even in traditional finance, for the lack of a network layer, right? So if your question is in terms of will the governments and will, let's say, the regulators and will the incumbents keep on resisting something like this? Definitely yes. But why is DeFi emerging? DeFi is emerging largely because it is creating a new paradigm. And in this new paradigm, there will be very interesting applications which were not thought about, typically in traditional finance, because that network layer, that level of, fungibility was completely missing. Extremely bullish, extremely bullish. I was actually, Prashant, earlier thinking that, it's going to take a lot of time for something like this to happen. But I think we have reached a tipping point. $100 billion value locked up, and Bitcoin reaching about $60,000-$70,000. So much of institutional interest from all quarters. Family offices keep on reaching out to us. I think we have reached a point of no return.
Right, but how does this intermediaries? Because banking system would be the first thing that will get impacted.
I hope that answers your question, Prashant. Prashant, you're on mute if you're trying to say anything.
Am I on mute still? Am I audible?
Yeah, audible, Prashant.
Okay. No. So first thing that would really hit will be the banking system, which has the intermediaries. But do you see the banking system objecting that, or then they would coming out with a negative perspective of how the decentralized finance might impact people. Because what I see when I look at organizations or corporations, and when they are trying to, not just from the finance perspective, there would be other frameworks like Hyperledger or consortiums kind of thing. They are kind of skeptical because they are not sure how the technology will take off when it comes to the decentralized format. One would be, of course, infrastructure. Second is there is more investment, and third is privacy and the GDPR issues that are coming in. So then, in that case, how do you really see the takeoff from the organization perspective as well?
Prashant, it's very simple. Sorry, Prashant, is it possible that you can be on mute? Yeah, thank you. There's an echo. So, Prashant, look, this is a step-wise process. Let's look at it this way, that the banking system is right now used to a very closed box, right? Okay, let me take analogies. There are two analogies. Let's look at it from a technology evolution point of view. Earlier, when basically we were all used to buying licensed copy of Microsoft. Then Unix came. So there was an open technology framework that came. Now it is all about creating more tooling around various frameworks, various technologies, experimentations, etc. Right? So I think what's happening is that people are accepting this as a new normal. Okay, now let's draw the parallels with the banking system. Banking system came from a license Raj, right? Where let's say the government decided, what kind of, who got the license, what is the capital supply, and so on and so forth. It was necessary for the civilizations to step up to a certain level, right? Now, after that came this whole process of liberalization, which was about creating more capacity for private players to participate. Then came a space wherein, let's say, fintech, and technology-based, solutions, which are centralized, but technology-based solutions were allowed, right? Now is coming a space wherein people are realizing that the economic system, the current system and the current rails are not able to solve for the problems of input and expression, right? So we have a problem at hand. It is not being solved right now. And somewhere, let's say, if you look at other countries, I'm taking some names of those countries, let's say Argentina, let's say Venezuela, Turkey, or Lebanon, etc., they have discovered some sort of a financial strength when the adverse economic cycles hit them. Okay, now the jury is out that once situations change, how it will impact, etc., and so on and so forth. But the point is that it's a shift, it's a social shift, which is happening, and the regulations always lag in many ways, and the incumbents will always want to have a status quo. It's basically what resistance, for example, Elon Musk got. Let's say when he was setting up battery units, or let's say designing cars, etc., right? But from his perspective, it was very clear that electric cars is the future, because crude, or let's say crude based vehicle system doesn't work. It's not sustainable. At least everyone knew that in 20-30 years crude is going to become either extremely expensive or going to run dry. So what I'm trying to say is that many times when as individuals we read too much into what's happening currently, and my view is that if you're building something very powerful, really means something to you, etc., then you should be looking at the future. Look at it this way. Let's say when Coinbase started their journey when Bitcoin was at $6, right? And at that point in time in that journey, nobody would have imagined that this will become 60,000. Bitcoin will become $60,000, and Coinbase from a $10 million valuation would be a 80 or 90 billion dollar, whatever price point that you look at, kind of within 6 years, right? So, so the limited point I'm making is that look at the macro trend. The macro trend is more seamless, more efficient, more frictionless environment, but with appropriate checks and balances. That's the future, right? From government to governance, right? And if you ask me, honestly speaking, any let's say any individual, let's say who's in a certain authority, let's say whether in regulations or whether in government, they also don't want to be interfering. They basically want to have the right kind of systems and mechanisms in place. And if here the concern from a government point of view is very simple, that FATF compliance, for example, you mentioned, right? Now, FATF compliance, FATF board has certain guidelines around virtual currencies. It has certain guidelines around even decentralized finance. Also, there are broadly certain guidelines, especially in terms of transactions cross border, etc., travel restrictions, and so on and so forth. It is not so complicated to be compliant with FATF, right? It just requires you to work with certain service providers and become a FATF compliant system. You can do transaction monitoring as well, working with Ellipti, with the chain analysis, CoinFirm, etc. So there are solutions which are out there, and a bunch of DeFi startups out there are using it, and the banks are using these DeFi startups in other economies. Coming to GDPR compliance, GDPR is also a mindset in terms of first is privacy of the data really matters. Now blockchain is built around privacy. So for you to become GDPR is much more easier. You just need to go through the checklist of GDPR, data producer, and basically who's processing it and so on and so forth, and look at what are the nuts and bolts, tighten it up, and build get yourself audited and take it forward from there. So what I'm trying to say is that in a traditional setup, becoming FATF compliant and GDPR compliant is extremely complicated because the systems are manual. But because it's a digital setup, that has been built, becoming FATF compliant, GDPR compliant is comparatively easier. And other thing is because all the transactions are recorded on blockchain, and if they get identified, let's say in some ways, I'm not taking the privacy coins and the privacy oriented transactions and DeFi into this. I'm just talking about KYC and AML ones. You can actually figure out what is the suspicious activity, what can be done about it, etc. So I think governments are going to love it as they embrace it more and more. It's very interesting. Other day I was hearing one of the partners at A16Z, and she was earlier working with SEC, and she was given a mandate to check out Bitcoin and see that whether it is something which should be banned potentially in US. She landed up switching sides and joining A16Z because she found nothing wrong with Bitcoin as a technology, and technology is always agnostic. It is about all of us collectively, or let's say as individuals, how do we step up and how we use those technologies. I hope this answers the question, because I'm sure this is also on your mind. It is not only a question which is coming from Prashant, but I'm sure this is also somewhere there in everyone's mind in terms of how governments are going to respond to this, how the future is going to shape up. My view is that as long as you're on the right side of the law, in terms of seeing that how you can build a very compliant system, basically something which protects the end user, etc., governments are going to like it. And eventually they're going to turn around and say that, okay, we were not aware of this new paradigm, but we really like what you guys are doing. We don't have a regulatory framework in place, but when we are ready, we'll regulate you. That's how typically regulators respond.
Indeed, thank you.
That was a lovely explanation, Pranav. Thank you. Anyone else wants to ask a question regarding DeFi, regarding the product idea that they're working on, anything? Guys, don't be shy. Yes. Mushtaq, please.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so hi Pranav. So basically during your introduction, what I heard from you was this keyword called building synthetics. If you could just help me understand what you mean by that. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Basically, Mushtaq, before you came in, Harshil, was we were having a short chat. So he was asking about synthetics and the collaterals, etc. So it's very simple. Basically, what blockchain helps you, let's see, even this whole digitization of tokens, etc., really helps you is to create equivalent tokens. So let's say, for example, if you have gold, you can create a synthetic gold. on the blockchain. Now, whether you leverage it, whether you borrow, lend it, whether you use it as a currency is something which is fungible, right? So that's what it simply means, there, synthetics. So synthetic, it means that in a physical context, what you will do is if I have 1 gram of gold, I will give somebody 1 gram of gold. But in this case, there'll be 1 gram equivalent, let's say a wrapped gold, which will be there, which will be the value will be picked up, let's say potentially from some exchange or credible source, etc., and which will be something that you can buy, but you will have claim to equivalent amount of gold. So that becomes synthetic. Now this is only a very simple synthetic. There could be very interesting synthetic. You can go, absolutely absurd around it. You can create a wrap around properties. You can fractionalize property, right? And you can, create, structured products around it. So I think what I keep on telling people is that people simply call it decentralized finance. I basically call it financial engineering on steroids, because that's what we are seeing right now. So all the play that you are seeing with synthetics and, with AMM and all the combination, etc., is like financial engineering on steroids. It's crazy stuff. And a lot of it is going to create, very crazy applications, one-way applications, and potentially not succeed in the bear market. But that's what it is. I mean, the space is giving you tools to build amazingly well-engineered applications, just, sitting, somewhere remotely.
Right. Thank you so much for that. And one more quick question I have is, what's your take on NFTs, and how exactly has your own organization, Woodstocks, right? So have you guys experienced any of the NFT frenzy out there? Would love to hear more about it.
Yes, I think this is the white elephant. I think it's a good conversation. So now, okay, let's look at the macro as to why NFTs are valuable, right? Now, I think the same question somebody would have asked, why is Facebook valuable? I'm sure like maybe 7-8 years back, just after, let's say, maybe Y2K, a couple of years down the line, people were like, who's going to chat? Why is Facebook going to become valuable? Are they going to ever make money? I'm sure a lot of these naysayers were there, right? So the interesting part is, potentially Facebook houses almost 1/6, or maybe, I don't know, maybe the latest statistics could be, let's say, 1/5 of the humanity. So in that sense, collaboration and, social connect is something which is a very important, human thing. And the second part is affinity. Now, affinity essentially is Facebook really capitalized on this extremely well, wherein, let's say, people who sort of identify with each other, who want to connect with each other, but they don't know each other, they don't have the bandwidth to connect with each other, figured out ways to connect with them in very intelligent ways, right? So the intersection of identity and affinity is basically a holy grail. Now, if you intersect this with value, right, then what you call as NFT, sort of emerges, and this entire rush. So what I'm trying to say is, let's say, for example, if I am somebody who holds, let's say there's a rare, I'm a fan of, let's say, Muhammad Ali, and I have, something which is extremely valuable to him, which is only going to be available to me on, let's say, blockchain. It's going to be with me forever. I'm going to pay to get it, right? So collectibles becomes a very obvious initial choice. But the future could be very interesting. I mean, look at it this way. For example, we are all sitting here discussing with Manav that what if, there was a gallery here in this room, just behind, let's say, all of you guys, wherein, let's say, some of the very rare NFTs were also there. And we could potentially go to every NFT and have a conversation about it and see that, how we can auction it, right? And maybe some of the money automatically goes to charity, and some money, goes to the proponents, and maybe goes to the family of the people who were, I don't know. I mean, it's like, look at it this way. Let's say Muhammad Ali was super successful. His daughter is successful, but it's a rare case. Sometimes, the family is not able to monetize what, their parents, could create of tremendous value because of their art form or whatever it is. So it creates a very different kind of a space in which, whatever intellectual property that we are creating as a humanity, and because, identity and affinity is so important to us, and because of this whole blockchain and cryptocurrency phenomena, because the intersection of value is also happening, this is just the beginning. This is going to proliferate in a massive way. And at Woodstock, we have taken our positions very early on. Even before this whole NFT frenzy started off, we invested into Terra Virtua. And there also, it's a very interesting story. So Terra Virtua, Eternity, and Superfarm are the three investments that are listed right now. Then we invested into Persistence, which is basically tokenized, I would say, synthetic in many ways NFT. Then there's a Round Labs, Mintbase. So we have made a bunch of investments, but a lot of these investments happened much before this whole frenzy began. Terra Virtua is particularly a very interesting story that they were actually raising an equity round when we had a conversation with them. And we were like, equity is great, but if you're looking for a significant raise, and of course, if you want to create a community, and if you want, let's say, community to, eventually experience, whatever IP, intellectual property that you have built in terms of, those specific NFTs, etc., then you should go for the token model. So we really help them out in terms of thinking through, going at it, bouncing off ideas, and so on and so forth. So this was almost like a year and a half back. So we have been, large investors in almost all these investments at a very early stage, as in seed round, private round, etc. And our sense is that this whole, I know there is euphoria, use the word euphoria, frenzy, etc. There is definitely frenzy. There is excitement around discovering value, etc. And this frenzy will eventually taper off to some extent possible, but the future is extremely bright of this. Look at it this way. Look, I mean, earlier we were all having conversations on WhatsApp, then Zoom call. Now we are looking at each other's avatar, right? And figuring out how we can interact. And then something else will emerge, which will be more interactive. So the future is, virtual, and the future is identity. And it's going to become extremely interesting in times to come.
I totally agree with you on that, Saurabh. Totally. I hope that answers your question, Mushtaq.
Yeah, it gave me a brief understanding about it. Thanks.
Awesome. Pranav, there is a question in chat by Gulshan. Where do you see NFT from here?
Extremely huge. I mean, I don't see a reason. Let's say now NFT. Okay, let's put it this way. The regulations for NFT, if you are talking about DeFi regulations, they are still regulations. We briefly spoke about FATF, GDPR, etc. But when it comes to NFT, it's complex. It's complex. So basically, even SEC and various other regulators are figuring out how to regulate, etc. And sometimes it is also about movement of goods and services across borders. So it basically goes through a lot of local. It may land up, violating a lot of local laws, etc. So so there are many applications which are under the scrutiny, and governments and regulators are figuring out how to create regulatory frameworks to ease the things, right? So my judgment is that the frenzy part, and I'm just picking up that word that Mushtaq mentioned earlier, the frenzy part eventually at some point has to taper off. It's not sustainable. Eventually, so let's say there are about 5,000, let's say if you are more generous, let's say 10,000 odd people who are buying and selling NFTs right now globally. It's a very small base, right? Unless this base becomes sizable, and this is very much the initial story when, let's say, the number of, people having Ethereum wallets, let's say about, 3.5, 4 years back. We're in the same situation right now. But people who have Ethereum wallets can easily switch over to owning NFTs, right? That can happen. So my sense is we're at least 1.5 year away, wherein, let's say, this frenzy can translate into something very interesting. And what could be extremely interesting in terms of NFT applications would be that, let's say, something like Facebook, let's say, having a NFT marketplace, right? Then something like, let's say, tokenization or fractionalization of real world assets using NFTs. Or it could be about, let's say, creating pathways for artists, let's say local artists. For example, let's say what WazirX is attempting to do. Local artists, who typically don't have the ability to position their talent effectively, having monetization pathways. India is a very plural society. So much of talent is out there in every part of the country. So I'm just thinking these, let's say, three kind of applications, and I'm sure there are more. If they can succeed, it will be a good barometer of how evolved this space is and how sustainable this space is. So extremely excited about how this is going to pan out from our perspective. Fund, these are all long-term journeys. We don't look at 3 months, 6 months. For us, it is about 3 years, etc. So we are extremely excited about NFT space. In the short term, there could be some glitches here and there, but long term, this is extremely exciting. Convergence with AR, VR would be very interesting. Something like what we are experiencing here in this room.
Thank you, Pranav. That was a very lovely explanation of explaining how NFTs can go about from India's point of view. Any other questions for Pranav?
Actually,
If I'm missing out on anyone's hands, please, guys, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
By the way, feel free. I mean, questions are always intelligent and answer is always stupid. So don't worry about it. Please go ahead.
Yes, I agree. Ask any question. Even the answers are not stupid, dear Pranav, but yes, please ask any question that you might have.
okay, maybe as people are preparing for their questions, maybe I can ask another one here. Pranav, you talked about tokenization, right? And definitely that is one of the most thing that is coming up. And considering from the blockchain and DeFi perspective, it will be one of the one of the most required stuff. But then, how do you see that tokenization catching up with other industries? You know, apart from financial industries, how do you see that happening in maybe pharma, healthcare, manufacturing, any of the other domains or any other industries? How do you see those things catching up?
So Prashant here, let's say tokenization is about fractional ownership and fungibility, right? Now today also you can have fractional ownership of an asset. There are regulations that permit, for example, let's say REITs in India. And I'm talking about, I mean, it's like people look at real estate differently. Some people consider it as a financial asset. Some people consider it as essential building block, right? In many ways, I mean, beyond the domain of financial services. Now, fractional ownership is can happen even through a REIT structure, etc. But let's say if you want to do a peer-to-peer transaction, then fungibility requires a network layer, which is like a blockchain, private, permissioned, or could be even, for that matter, a public blockchain. But that is the power of tokenization on a blockchain, right? Now the question is, let's say pharma. Let's take an example of pharma. Now let's say, what do you want to tokenize there? You want to tokenize, let's say, the top line, bottom line of the company, which you can right now also. There have been certain experiments which have happened where, let's say, you can fractionalize the top line rather than issuing shares. You practically do in a way, it's like you're doing your own version of private placement, and through a issuance platform. And creating and basically distributing these securities to different people so that they can have a share of the revenues that come from a pharma company. So this is, I'm sure your question was not exactly towards there, but let's say if you're looking at it as a derivative in terms of how do I gain from the financial growth of a pharma company, then tokenization of the company's revenue or bottom line is one way. The second way is that, let's say, a molecule has been built. Now you want to share the economics with, let's say, 2,000, 5,000 people, right? You can always do it. You can also choose a product line and you can tokenize it. So that, let's say, 1,000, 2,000 people benefit. Right now, these molecules are largely owned by, let's say, for example, COVID, for example, let's say this vaccine is owned by a few centralized pharmaceutical companies. What if, let's say, it can be co-owned by, let's say, 20,000 people? right? So the money can quickly come in, you can build stuff, you can scale up, facilities, you can, take things forward and make these things available at a comparatively lower cost than what it is right now, potentially, because your cost of borrowing will be lesser, etc., and so on and so forth. So tokenization, I see it from that point of view. I mean, there could be very interesting pathways to even sponsor innovation for pharmaceutical companies, right? For example, like a lot of these startups in the crypto space, they raise money. Unfortunately, at times through white paper. Can it happen, let's say, in terms of raising, let's say, maybe I'm just saying 1,000 ETH equivalent, which is, let's say, significant, right? In, let's say, $2,500 per ETH, that amount can be raised for innovation for a specific molecule, right? So I think this world is not too far. It is just a question of everyone is just waiting for regulations to emerge, and as the regulations will emerge, you will have a lot of crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, crowd participation models emerge, which we loosely call as tokenization. Prashant, does it help?
Yes, very much. So just extending that part of it, would it also mean that, if I'm considering, for example, automotive industry or manufacturing industry, can I also use that, because when I see a lot of transactions do happen, when I, manufacturing automobile industry, there are huge number of transactions that happen, and it happens at every level, right? From, suppliers to parts to other things. Then I was wondering, how would the tokenization I could kind of get into that industry? Finance definitely is one which is one way moving both the ways for that matter. But then there are other things also moving along with it, which is, fungible atoms. So this, the value of this is given, and they're exchanging today with the fiat currency. So it is something that we can move towards a way wherein a digital currency can be used. And also trying to move away from the thought process of that it is only related with financials and nothing to do with any other industry. So that was the kind of concept that I was getting to see whether it can be moved into any other industries also. And
No, that's a good question. So let's look at it this way. For example, let's say Tesla allowed Bitcoin to be used as a mode of payment, right? Now, a single car right now can only be owned by an individual, right? You can't have part ownership of a car right now. So then those frameworks, those regulations don't exist, right? So now the question is, let's say when you're talking about automotive industry, let's say, for example, if it's like I'm just saying hypothetically, let's say it's like a 50 lakh rupee car. And, it's like, 5-7 people want to potentially buy it together. And can they all claim depreciation around it? So when I'm saying financial, I mean to say that, eventually anything that you purchase, essentially either it is about ownership or it is about cash flow, right? So unless those frameworks emerge, unless there is an acceptance that there could be rails for part ownership of something, yet the ownership will be definite and the disputes can be settled on chain. For example, let's say through smart contracts or whatever it is, and they will not land up, they will not all land up, being in the in the courts of the country. Things will reach that point wherein this will happen. Now coming to, let's say, NFTs. Now NFT, for example, let's say if you create an NFT around a Tesla car, or let's say Maruti car, for example, let's say in Indian context, and you sell that NFT in India, okay? And what it does is essentially this NFT gives you the power to have a car, let's say, from the nearest dealer, right? Now, if this NFT is issued by Maruti, or let's say one of the agencies which is working on Maruti's behalf, it works well. Because technically as a producer, you can give the authority to somebody else to buy or own, etc. But if this is going to come from a third party, then you need to follow various laws of the land. You need to, of course, there are GST and there are various, other regulations, taxation, and so on and so forth. So there are things are complex. What I'm trying to say from an NFT point of view is that NFT and the real world assets, the regulations have to emerge. And in the world, these regulations don't exist right now because fractional ownership means disputes. Look at our country itself. India is an agrarian country. Let's say about 75% odd, comes from, let's say, rural and, farming, etc., right? But India is also a land of marginal lands, and there are perpetual disputes. There are disputes in terms of, basically further fractionalization as, within the family. There is also disputes in terms of people usurping the land. There are also disputes in terms of, if let's say today I want to aggregate all the land holdings, it becomes very complex. So I think an area like this, which is basically, let's say, land aggregation or land, cultivation and some intelligence, if this area can be modeled around, creating NFTs so that people can own, they can combine land, they can deal with, land very systematically, etc. I think this can be an area of significant disruption as a starting point. After land, real estate, gold, etc., and then the regulations and world will open up to more complex things like pharmaceutical molecules or automobiles, etc. So I think it's an evolutionary step is the point I wanted to make.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Pranav.
I could see somebody raising their hands. Who was it?
Yeah, it was me, Amarnath.
Anyone has a question in the first row?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, Harsh.
Pranav, my actual idea was to build synthetics real estate, and but my main concern was that first is whether people would give capitalization for that for buying a real estate, and the second thing is real estate changes every 50-kilometer radius, so the price fluctuation is there are different price fluctuation for that. So my main concern was that for the price fluctuation, whether how could I deal with it and how could I bring that price fluctuation to my text.
So, yeah, definitely. So, Harshal, those basically when you are fractionalizing, or let's say you are tokenizing a real world asset, then the underlying you have to make it predictable. Look, there is already a variability when you're applying a certain technology and opening it up to the market risk of, let's say, cryptocurrencies, for example, right? Your underlying, you have to figure out a way to peg it. For example, let's say we're looking at Bangalore. I see a lot of you are from Bangalore, for example, right? So I know what you're saying, that Bangalore within Indranagar also is not homogeneous. The rate changes practically, road to road, right? So how do you harmonize? And our answer is you can't. The only way you can do is you can identify a specific real estate or a bundle of real estate, sort of, create a certain, pricing around it, fractionalize it, create multiple, kind of people to own it, etc. So if you ask me honestly, from my view perspective, the retail play around this will take some time. The bigger plays around wholesale, and that too wholesale debt, tokenization, or let's say, synthetics around let's say wholesale debt, especially to very large builders, which could be distressed debt, for example, which could be typically the market perceives it as let's say A, but technically it is double A, right? Because there are various risk mitigants which have been put into it, etc. So it can generate a fairly good alpha for the end user. So my sense is real estate debt, and that to wholesale real estate debt, is the first port of all. I know it may sound very complex, what I'm saying to a lot of you actually, but what I'm saying is that wholesale real estate debt, as in, for example, if there's a large builder like, let's say, Prestige, you give them, let's say, 1,000 crores, right? Now this 1,000 crores, let's say, gives you 20% interest rate. Can you tokenize this, and can this be available? Now, typically a bank takes an exposure on this, or NBFC takes an exposure. Can this exposure be taken by 10,000 people, 20,000 people, 50,000 people, right? So that is one area which I think would be the low-hanging fruit. And after that, it would be about retail debt. Then it will be about wholesale ownership of real estate assets. For example, let's say an entire Prestige building in, let's say, Whitefield area, right? Complex, like 7, 8 buildings or whatever it is. And then it will come to retail, because retail is slightly more complex. As you rightly mentioned, the number of SKUs are very high. So in short, what I'm saying is that you will build the technology where technology is there, but the market will take some time to respond. This is my personal view. At least 2 to 3 years. I mean, regulations have to evolve, consumers have to evolve, and you have to create a very vibrant marketplace for you to have enough supply.
Thanks, Pranav.
From Krishna.
Yes, I also saw in the chat. It's basically saying, is DeFi with AI possible?
I think it is huge. Like for example, we are discussing about credit layer, right? For example, let's say I'm just saying, let's say if I have, let's say one BTC, if I am putting that one BTC as a collateral, and somebody else is, let's say potentially USDT, let's say 60% of BTC equivalent, I'm getting USDT. That's a very simple and very lame transaction, right? And that's where a lot of these protocols have become extremely scalable. I think the most interesting would be that, let's say, if I have a great track record of repaying my debt on time through smart contracts, and if the system has enough way to figure out, let's say through history, etc., and make a conjecture that I will have enough liquidity at the back end to service the debt no matter what, because I've done it for the past 2 years, and give me, let's say, 90% on that USDT, right? Let's say on one Bitcoin, I give 90% USDT or 95% USDT. It's going to be very, very, it's going to be something very powerful. So what I'm saying is that traditional lending borrowing that is happening in crypto space, if it can be layered with a credit layer, which is driven by machine learning and artificial intelligence, I think it can be phenomenal. So I'm just talking about lending borrowing, no, by the way. This is one set of application. Similarly, when you have built AMMs, now AMMs are technically algorithms. And if AMMs can become interesting, intelligent enough in terms of figuring out that, what kind of transactions, they should do, and, how much fees it should be, etc. It will become even more interesting, for people who are like regular users of DeFi. Similarly, same thing can be there in insurance. For example, typically how crypto insurance is at a very early stage, at a very formative stage. And right now, everyone is, sort of, dabbling around something very simple. They are either creating pools or they are, trying to tie up with Lloyd's Insurance or one of those guys. Very premature, very early stage applications are happening right now. But if there is a way that, for example, let's say Harshal, let's say you come from a certain background, which has a certain kind of, let's say, affluence, in terms of your credit history is brilliant. Now, credit history has a great correlation with underwriting and premium paying capacity. So if those correlations can be built, and if there is a way for the algorithm to find similar kind of Harshals, then your crypto insurance can actually scale up massively. So what I'm trying to say by sharing all of these applications is that yes, the simple answer is DeFi and AI is going to be huge whenever it emerges. I'm extremely bullish and I'm extremely keen, and that is why it is very important for the traditional finance people, for the AI ML people to closely collaborate with the DeFi people and create applications for the future. So I think I'm extremely bullish on it.
That was some really interesting examples that you gave there, Pranav. And you guys can, check in your ideas if you can future see if AI can be added or something can work around that. Might be just be the changing thing, what the industry might be looking at. All right, anyone else has any questions? No other questions for Pranav?
So, Manav, I have a question.
Yes, Musta.
So, Pranav, there's this OpenSea, right? The largest NFT marketplace. So, apparently 80% of all the sales come from about 10% of all the sellers. So, what does this make sense? I mean, how do you make sense of this statement? What do you understand from it? Could you
We are too early.
Acha.
We're too early. I mean, it has to massively scale up. basically, basically that means that there are set of people who are early adopters are are driving the, you use the word frenzy, right? But point is that these people are putting in real money, so that is one. I'm further bifurcating this into two categories. One is there could be an artist who could be reselling his work, etc. It is, or maybe there could be something which is like circular money movement, etc. Just let's assume that all of this is clean, whatever is happening there, right? So too early, too few adopters, but the fundamental substance is brilliant, because in the sense that the new age, the Gen Z is extremely keen to dabble with NFTs, right? So I don't know. I mean, there are two ways of looking at it. One way to look at it, this is we were very early into this, so there is a massive opportunity. Other way to look at it is that we are very early, and for all the frenzy, this frenzy should taper off, and then we'll be ready for the bigger opportunity in the future.
Thank you, Pranav. That was a very interesting thing. And I agree with you completely about NFTs. We are very early. So there is a question in the chats from Sain Lakshman. And he's saying, can't trade finance be done using DeFi or trade finance on blockchain?
And why not? Question is why not? I mean, if you look at even I mean, ICICI Bank, is dabbling with, trade finance on blockchain, So, I mean, the answer is yes. And if your question is about international finance, so there are two things. One is domestic trade finance, and second is international trade finance, right? International trade finance, definitely from a settlement perspective, or let's say from smart contracts, can handle all of those variability. But you definitely require a layer in terms of ensuring that all the documentation are taken care of, bill of lading, etc. These are like practically the standards which have been globally set. So the world in which everything will happen on smart contracts, everything will happen on blockchain, and the whole process will be extremely seamless, we are a little bit delayed from that world because of COVID situation also. I think the governments, in any case, kept all of this on a back burner. So I think, in short, usage of blockchain in supply chain is a very obvious use case. But somebody was asking me this question, and I was telling him that unfortunately in supply chain, the incumbency factor is also very high. There is a certain acceptable way of doing things. So the change management is going to take some time. So in an ideal world, yes, trade finance and DeFi are made for each other. But in a practical world, it's going to take some time.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Pranav.
But Manav, I think I'm just want to be sure that I'm not discouraging somebody who's building a trade finance app for on blockchain. So Mana, I'm sorry to hold you on. So my suggestion here would be build the best application in the trade finance side, right? If you're building some sort of application, don't think about what are the current issues. The same thing that I spoke initially. Don't think about the current issues. The regulations catch up late. The compliance and everything, all of these things they catch up late. Always think about the Coinbase story. That those guys had conviction and had a very grand vision when Bitcoin was at $6, and they wanted to do everything in a very compliant way. They always worked very closely with the regulators, and they created an $80 billion company, right? So the space is extremely wide open. So if you create the best trade finance application on blockchain, which is extremely easy to use, and you are getting all the relevant people involved, etc., doing all the right things which are necessary to follow the law of the land, working very closely with the regulators, etc., building things brick by brick, I think there's a massive space to disrupt. Trade finance is very inefficient, traditional finance.
Thanks, Pranav. I totally agree. And always remember, Google was not the first search engine. It was the 26th. So it's all about how well and you are able to solve the problem and reach out to people. And you never know what works best for you guys. All right. Any other questions that you have for Pranav? Guys, we got him. He booked some time for us. So if you have any questions, you should ask him now. No other question?
Okay, Manav, looks like I have all the questions today.
Yes, Mushtaq, that's great. Always great to
One
know.
last question. So, what I'm interested in knowing is for someone like you, Pranav Sharma, how does Pranav Sharma keep updated with the crypto ecosystem? I'm just curious to know.
No, actually, this is like a $1 billion question. It's not even a $1 million question. No, actually, what I can say is that, okay, so let me maybe share, some practical insights in terms of what really helps, right? One is that you have to building your own network. You have to build your own network because ultimately you're only as good as the information that you receive, right? So and as all of you guys know that your news is not your network. Your popular Telegram channels is not your network. Your network is basically people whom you can trust completely and who are looking at this space in a similar sphere, although in a different way. So this is point number one. So I have a fairly good network, and over the past 4 years, I've only invested in building a network, and I have follow one philosophy in life that not every relationship has to be transaction oriented. It has to be first about contribution. You should contribute to other people, not expect anything else, and things come back to you. So I'm not going into the philosophy, secret principle, and all those things. I'm not saying that, but purely if let's say the whole decentralization as a world, works on the principle of contribution, goodwill, relationships, etc. So that's one network. The second part is build your judgment around patterns that work, right? At the same time, be open to challenge those patterns, right? So what I mean by that is that human beings are a bundle of patterns. DeFi is a bundle of patterns, right? So humans interacting with these patterns is what is creating value or destroying value. And once you're able to build a fairly good judgment around, let's say this, you're able to understand whether this will create value or not create value, right? So invest in terms of understanding patterns. It may be very frustrating for you to go too deep into something and figure out the nuts and bolts, but it's the only path to become better than the 90% in terms of having a better judgment on something. And the third thing I would say is that just keep learning. I mean, I know this seems very cliched, what I'm saying, but if you find something interesting which opens up your mind to something different, read it like a child. So the child in you, when it comes to learning, reading, etc., should never die. In short. So these are the three things which I would share with you, and this is what I've done. And for me, this is what I will keep on doing in the rest of the emerging technologies also, because as a fund, we will be focusing beyond blockchain into other emerging technologies as well. Because our thesis is that these emerging technologies will converge to create futuristic applications, which will transform the world, solve for various challenges that we grapple with around expression, around inclusion, etc. So this is just tip of the iceberg. There's so much more interesting stuff to come. I don't know whether this helps or not, but these are three things I do at a very high level. Of course, there's DeFi Pulse, and there are various, credible sources. So those, I think you all should refer in any case.
Thank you, Pranav. I think so that was really well explained, and that's a lovely philosophy that you follow, and I would encourage everyone to do the same thing. It actually helps a lot, keeping these points in mind and keeping yourself updated with things that's happening around you. All right, so we have a last question here in the chats, Pranav, by Rishabh. He wants to know if what are some of the projects that you know of trying to solve the credit issue with less or no collateralization, and it can be outside blockchain space.
No, so outside blockchain space, there are plenty. Unsecured loans is like hot in India. So I think that is something which is in any case something that we're grappling with. It has created also a bit of a bubble also in India with microfinance. I mean, somebody who has like 15,000 rupees of paying capacity has 315,000 rupee loans in individual capacity in India. So we are facing a different kind of an issue, right? And the issue actually is also because ultimately, let's say 3 different companies lend to the same person, they look at the same document. There is no fungibility of credit history that happens across. And that is one of the reason I believe that blockchain or decentralized ledger technology will be phenomenal, because they'll be sharing of some basic data, which will ensure that you don't land up, over lending to retail, because retail money never comes back, right? Practically, corporates, you can chase them, you can find a way, you can sell the assets, etc. But with retail, the delinquencies, especially when the economic cycles turn, are absolute. There is typically no recourse. I'm so sorry. So this is one part of the thing. Now, let's say if you come to blockchain space, I think very limited innovation has happened. There is one successful startup, I'm completely missing, its name, which raised a significantly large amount in US, which is basically build a very intelligent, layer around, credit issue, in terms of how you can use credit history for effective borrowing and lending in crypto space. But beyond this, I've not seen too much of innovation happening. There was one startup I was encouraging. They are basically into chit fund and very intelligent chit fund lending. They're fintech into chit fund space, but they are making more money in the chit fund space, and it becomes slightly complex for them to start dabbling with crypto, especially when they have a traditional business. So I think there is a huge opportunity in my view. If you can build a very intelligent credit layer with, let's say, AI, ML, and with an extensive database, I think it can be a massive opportunity.
All right, okay. Thank you, Pranav, for that answer. Anything in the blockchain space that you know of for unsecured loan? Particularly, have you come across?
I mean, if you look at it, whether it is, the entire DAO structures, etc., MakerDAO, and so on and so forth, I mean, they're all in a way unsecured, but I won't call them as unsecured technically, because, it's like they're backed by reputation in some ways, right? But credit history is something which has not been taken into cognizance. There's some sort of it's like amount of money that you put, right? And the vintage that you have, in terms of whether you were like super early, were you there in the seed round, in the private round, etc.
Makes sense. I think I get your point, what you're trying to say there. Right. So with that, if no one has any other questions for Pranav, we can say thank you, Pranav, for taking out time on a Saturday evening and enlightening us, all of us, with your, experience and knowledge about this space.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Pranav.